Do your thing.
Okay, here we go. People are starting to check in. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here today with us. We're so glad you joined us. Welcome to our webinar for today, Mirror, what does a good board look like? We're super happy to have you guys on today. I would like to take an opportunity to thank our dedicated and amazing business partners and management companies that have kept us afloat this year during this pandemic. And I would just like to acknowledge some of them. So thank you to our sponsors for today. Community Property Management. Bob, would you like to say a few words?
Well, I'm happy to be a sponsor, or CPM's happy to be a sponsor. We're always looking to support the managers and support the chapter. So I'm excited about hearing Rob's perspective on this.
Thanks, Bob. We also have the Greenwood Group. They, I guess, weren't able to join us today, so we would like to acknowledge them and thank them for sponsoring and helping us stay afloat this year. And Century Management, Phyllis and Alan weren't able to be here today as well, but we would also like to thank them for their sponsorship. Now I am thrilled to welcome our most requested speaker of all time, Rob, in case you didn't know that.
I did not.
Every year we ask our members to give us suggestions on what they would like to see for programs and what sponsor, or not sponsors, what presenters they would like to see. And you are always on the list. So I just wanted to let you know that. So why don't you tell the group a little bit about you, and Bob and Diana, and I will turn off our videos and mute ourselves so you can start the presentation.
We'll be back. Sweet. Great. Thank you so much, Kathy. It's always good to be back here in St. Louis, even though I can't be there physically. One of my favorite places to go, and I appreciate the sponsors for the program and the fact that we can bring this to you remote. I hope you're able to get something out of it. As most of you know, I've been in the industry a significant amount of time, and this year is my 40th year in the community association industry. I've done everything from large scale management to I own a small company here in Boise, Idaho, with my partners out of Seabreeze Management in California, Isaiah Henry, who's a great partner. And then I have my own reserve study company. I've done multiple reserve studies for some of you even. So, but one of the things that I enjoy the most is providing insight into management and into boards and what functions. And this program was really a program that came to be as a part of the concept of what are the best qualities that a board possesses in order to be successful. I actually serve on my board for my community association.
I'm sorry, Rob. I hate to interrupt you, but I saw that Jason popped in.
Yeah,
he's one of our speakers today. I'm sorry, one of our sponsors for today, excuse me. Jason, would you like to tell us a little bit about the Greenwood Group? And we thank you for sponsoring today.
Thank you for having me. And I'm sorry I'm a little bit late because this is actually my first Zoom meeting. So
awesome.
It took me a little time to get things together. I'm not very technical, so.
You're good.
But no, thanks for having me. The Greenwood Group, a landscape maintenance company here in the St. Louis area. We are an accredited landscape industry accredited company. We're one of only 11 companies in North America that have that distinction. So we're very proud of that. In order to get that through our national organization, you have to have so many accredited managers, and you have to pass all these tests and things, but I won't get into all that, but it's something that we're very proud of, to be an accredited company. Very quickly, I won't keep up a lot of time, but I wanted to mention to everybody that's listening the importance of a scope of work when you're getting a bid for landscape maintenance or any other service, really. To bid off of an old scope of work with a company that you're not happy with really isn't a good idea. The best idea is to have a property evaluation to find out what your property's needs are And there are a lot of things that are proposed by companies that aren't needed anymore. Maybe they used to be, but the scope is so old and just needs to be updated. So that's something that we can provide for you also. And just get that solid scope of work together that's going to be everything that your property needs. And I think that's the most important thing to remember. Also, the Greenwood Group, we're just looking for an opportunity to bid any properties that you have. If you're happy with your current contractor, we understand. We're happy about that too, because there's a lot of us out there that are great companies, and just hope to have the opportunity to bid whenever the time arises for you.
Thanks, Jason. We appreciate you. Thanks so much for sponsoring today.
All right, Kathy, are you outside? It looks like you're outside.
No, I'm not outside. This is my virtual background, but
Gotcha.
I tried to look like, community, association like. But
Great.
thank you. I'm
All
going to
right.
go ahead and
Jason, do you work in Illinois? Was already a question.
We do not currently service Illinois. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't, but it depends on the size of the property, if it's worth our trip all the way over there. We are located in New Melle out in St. Charles County, so it's kind of a trip for us.
Great. Thank you, Jason.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and turn off your video, Jason, and mute you. And then Rob, you can take back over. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
No problem. And Jason, thank you for sponsoring. I appreciate all the sponsors. As I mentioned before, I've been in this business quite a while, and it takes a lot of volunteers and it takes a lot of sponsors. Kathy and I have known each other for a very long time, and as your chapter executive director, she's done a great job, and I give her many, many kudos for continuing to organize and keep your chapter as one of the greatest chapters that we have in the U.S. Going back, this program was written and started developing when I was a general manager of Sun City in Tucson back in the 90s. I started looking at boards of directors and collecting what I felt were some of the best characteristics of successful boards, and then prompted a program that was really conceptualized around what are some of those characteristics and how can you really articulate them? Because some of us know when we have a good board as managers, and some of us know when we have a troublesome board. You have to realize that in the US, there's about 360,000 community associations. And if you averaged out 5 board members in association, I'll let you do the math, but you're 1.7 million plus board members that are volunteers, woefully underpaid for a lot of the things that they do. And yet they have a duty. And I'm going to run through some slides, give you some concepts and some ideas about what board members should really be focused on. As I was mentioning, I too serve as a board member on my board. I'm the vice president of the board, and a small association, self-managed. And we've had to deal with stuff like communication to our members. How do we orchestrate that and those kinds of things? So what is our duty as a board when we're serving a community association, a nonprofit corporation? And on your slide, you'll see some words, and you're more than welcome to capture those. But the basis of any board is to preserve, maintain, and enhance the value of the assets of the corporation. That's really it. Preserve, maintain, and enhance the value of the assets of the corporation. You have a responsibility to cooperate within that association, to enforce the governing documents, collect assessments, pay bills, and conduct business. Those are your responsibilities. But your duty really is very unique. Preserve, maintain, and enhance the value of the corporation. So any of the decisions that you take on in that process are very critical to fulfilling that duty. One of the things that I looked at over the years was, why do people even serve on boards? And I identified a couple of really key characteristics. Some of you will see these. Some of you have seen these. Some of you already know who I'm talking about. And some of you actually are these people if you're a board member. Some people serve because of ego. There's just no doubt about it. They feel like they've got something that they want to share. We just went through a board election where board members had been trying to get on the board for countless years. We've been managing the community for 10 years, and I've probably seen it the last 4 or 5 years, where these guys have been trying to get on the board, and the current board finally decided not to run. We elect board members here annually because there's really no state statutes in Idaho, but they've been trying to get on the board. They couldn't get on board. They finally got on the board, and they're just all over the place. They don't have a plan about what they wanted to do. They just really wanted to get on the board. And it was really driven by their ego. Some of the board members want to give back to their community. Some of them want to control the power in their community. They might dislike who's serving on a board. And so they're driven to do that. Some people want to serve on a board to fulfill their own agenda. Sometimes that agenda is, I want to lower the assessments, which is a bad agenda. Or I want to have this project done, or I want to make an amenity or something like that. A lot of them have self-serving interests. What I found to be one of the highest, in my view, one of the highest regards for people who run are they only serve because someone asks them to serve. One of my board members that became my mentor and my friend was a gentleman named John Wickham. John was the former chief of staff of the Army. Some of you have heard me talk about him before. And former chief of staff of the Army, and he was my board president at Sun City for 3 years. And the only reason John ran for the board is because people in the community went to John and said, would you please run for the board? I took the board through transition from the developer, and John played a wonderful role in identifying what my responsibility was as a manager and what the board's responsibility was in conducting business for the association. And when I looked at that, I thought, why did he wait to be asked? And I started doing a great deal of research into servant leadership. And one of the characteristics of a servant leader is that they usually don't put their name up first. They usually wait until they're asked to serve. And so it's imperative to see the difference. So we want to talk about the do's and don'ts of service. And don't be afraid to serve. I think there are many people who are reluctant to serve because someone is already served. Someone is already serving, and so what you're faced with is some sort of blockage for people who actually want to serve. One of the things that I'm constantly challenged with is, for myself, is actually saying no when I'm asked to serve, because I'm kind of an industry enthusiast. I'm always asked to do things and I just jump right on them and do them. But sometimes when people are serving, they're preventing someone else from serving. And so sometimes it's good to step back and ask, why am I serving? Here's the real key to service, though, in our industry, and that is, regardless of why you were elected to serve or appointed to serve or volunteered to serve or asked to serve, your duty is to serve the entire community. You have to set aside your own agenda. You have to set aside all of the things that you might have thought were the right things to do, and you have to listen to what is best for the entire community. Preserve, maintain, and enhance the value of the assets. That really is the duty of every board member. And so when you're elected, regardless of why you were elected, you now have to serve the entire community. I've broken down board member roles into really 4 different areas. And I want you to take a look at these 4 different areas. I'll talk about them here in just a moment in a little more depth. But really, you come about board service as a staff facilitator. Your job as a board member is to help your staff, your management staff, your contractors, whatever it is, facilitate them getting the job done. Not that you have to do it. The second one is to be a community builder, to really think about why people are there. Why do we even call it community association when in fact it is our responsibility to help build community, help bring unity back together? There are processes and consensus that we have to take, and you need to promote those. You need to be the champion of those within your community association. And then finally, you need to develop teams within your community. Most of the time, it's really just the board. And I often ask boards, how difficult is it to find volunteers to serve on committees? And generally, the take is it's very difficult to find people to serve. And so your job is to help process that within the community association. So here's a little more in depth on each of these. So a board member as a staff facilitator does a number of things. You have to see your staff as part of your entire team. You have to respect what they do. You have to respect the professionalism that they bring. You have to establish protocols that work within your community. How do people submit something to the board to have the board consider? How does the board set its agenda? How does the board communicate to the manager? And how do people within the community communicate to the board? Those kinds of protocols are really, really important, because most of you know that as a board member, you only have protection on the things that you do as a board, not as a board member, not as an individual member on the board, but as a board. Your decisions as a board are what's protected in your D&O insurance. So if you're running around doing something because you're on the board and you can do whatever you want, you're putting your personal wealth at risk. And if you got sued because you interrupted a contractor, or you did something, or you gave approval for an architectural submittal without the board going through their process or their protocols, you yourself could be held personally liable. So be very, very cautious about that. So as a staff facilitator, your job is to help set the protocols that work within the community. You have to rely on staff, not surprise staff, but you have to rely on staff. You have to give them the opportunity to respond to the inquiries of the board. You have to understand the difference between you as a board member being a policy decision maker as opposed to the staff being a task initiator. Policy decisions versus tasks. Policy decisions are what the board should be doing, and you need to pull back from actually the tasks at hand yourself. And finally, you need to set the proper protocols for how you communicate with your business partners, because your business partners get different information from different people. Everybody has an opinion in your community, especially when I think about the largest expense in most community associations is landscaping. Oftentimes landscapers get confused because of the different kinds of community communication that they get from the board and from people within the community. So make sure that you're setting that correctly. So as a board member, as a community builder, you have some other responsibilities. You need to reach out and collaborate with other organizations. I think of block watches, those kinds of things. Your job is to help build those kinds of consensus. Engage in developing and implementing visioning within your community. I go back to looking at 40 years in this business, and I will tell you that the most successful communities in this country are those that were started by a vision that the developer set and initiated, created a mission to accomplish their vision, and that community stays true to their vision. I'll give you one quick example. At Sun City in Tucson, when I was the manager there, the vision for that community was Sun City will be a congenial group of active adults pursuing lifestyle amenities and activities and stuff like that. Someone came to the board and asked the board, hey, we need to start a program, Meals on Wheels, because there's people that are aging in our community. We need to make that a program of our community. And the board asked me to go back and study it. And I studied it, and when I looked at it in depth, the Meals on Wheels program is more of an assisted living program, not active adult, more of assisted living. And so I brought it back to the board and I said, so how do you want me to pursue with this? Do you want to change our vision to accommodate the aging within our community, or do you want to keep the community focused on what its current vision is, which is being active adult? But the Meals on Wheels program really doesn't fit within that vision. And the board examined it and said, you know what, you're exactly right. It doesn't fit our vision as a community. Thank you very much. And we went on with doing other things that filled the vision or fulfilled the vision that our community had really established early on, which was to be active adult. Golf, a swimming pool, health center. We had 86 clubs within that community that were really, really active. And so the visioning process is really, really important for your community. If you're having dysfunction within your community, my suggestion is you step back, set a vision, and change how you're reacting to things within your community. You have to seek positive input from people. There's a book written by Ken Budd that talks about reasonableness within community and in community associations, reasonableness in setting rules and expectations and those kinds of things. And I would encourage you to look in the CAI bookstore and get that book if you're having a problem. But, you know, we don't, this is already a chaotic enough life. We don't need to create disharmony within our community by being unreasonable. We need to be reasonable in kinds of rules and regulations we write and how we enforce them. We need to really publicly acknowledge our volunteers and set those protocols on how to interact with one another within the community. It's interesting, when I got on the board for my little association, the board members were exhausted that I got on with. Some of them had been on for a couple of years, and they said, man, we just keep getting emails from people. And I said, well, stop. I said, tell everybody to send their email to one email box, and then we all get to do it, because no one person should be answering everybody within the community that responds to them. There are different tools out there to use, but the board itself should be the responding body. So make sure that you're doing that. Make sure the board is in consensus when you're responding to inquiries of your members. It's the only way to protect yourself as a body. The next one is, as a board member, being a process and consensus promoter. You'll see a number of things I've listed there. Consistent decision making. Boy, I tell you what, it is really, really important that the board be consistent in how they accept inquiry from people and how they process that inquiry and the decisions that they make. You need to be inclusive. You need to, if you have a committee and that committee gives you an example, you need to consider that example or that request or proposal and consider that as part of your decision process. Make sure that you use due diligence. Make sure you're getting bids. Make sure you're asking the right questions. Avoid conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest within our business is absolutely huge, and conflicts of interest with board members is paramount. I was dealing with I won't even tell you the name of the company because it's a national company, but with a board member that was supported by this national organization, and the board treasurer was taking money out of the reserve fund and investing it on his own, and because he thought he was a great investor. He lost money, and you know what, it was really sad that he lost money that was protected by the fiduciary responsibility of the board. And he had a tremendous conflict of interest in what he was doing, but no one called him out on it until there was lost funds. The last one is provide an opportunity for debate. Now, in this time and age with Zoom meetings, it's a little more difficult, but you know, people needed to debate issues. I'm not talking about arguing, but really debate issues. The board needs to debate issues. I always loved John Wickham's approach to the board debating issues. I had a 7-member board at Sun City. And the debate was pretty much a cycle around the board. It wasn't how many times you said the same thing or how loud you were. It was the ability to argue your position on a particular issue. And then we went on and we voted. And when we were done voting as a board, not me, but the board, when they were done voting, that was the decision of the board. If you did not agree with the majority of the board, too bad. You didn't get an opportunity to disparage the board, and you were always discouraged from disparaging the board following that board meeting. It's a decision of the board. We're going through a presidential election. You may not accept what the outcome of the election is, but you know what? That's the president of the United States. You got to accept it and move forward. That's the same thing with our boards. It is the exact same thing. And if you need to come back and consider another decision that affects the same issue, then do that. But that comes at a later time. So provide an opportunity for debate is big within communities. And as a team developer, a board has a number of responsibilities that it needs to consider. You have to have an interactive organizational structure where you're talking to your committees, where you're using your committees. You need to partner with them and staff. Delegating to your committees is really, really important. Engaging volunteers. I have always encouraged board members that part of their duty as a board member is to find board members that are going to come behind them and replace them. It's absolutely paramount. This little community that I live in, that I'm on the board now, that's our job, is to interact with the members in a manner in which we're identifying those who are going to be serving on the board next. And we need to engage volunteers. Again, a good servant leader, which to me is one of the most valuable members on any board or committee, is that individual that's asked to serve. And it's really important for us to take that time to do that, to ask people to serve. So let's move on. So I talked earlier about successful characteristics. Now, I've probably interacted with hundreds of boards over 40 years. And what I did was I started looking at characteristics that I found were the top characteristics. They're not every board possesses all of these, and it would be facetious to think that anybody would. But I'm sure that some of you recognize some of these characteristics, and I would encourage you to identify those that are good for your community. So listening first is a priority is one of the greatest characteristics. Boy, I'll tell you what, there's nothing worse than people that try and talk over one another, especially in a board meeting. It's just beyond me. Instead of debating an issue respectfully, they don't want to listen first. They have their agenda and they want to push it. Open meetings are really critical as a good characteristic. In certain states right now, it's prohibited to have email decisions by the board. And that came about because that's not seen as being open for evaluation to the public. Proper notice is key, except when you're having an emergency. Having communication with the members. There's tools out there. There's tools in the software world that can help you communicate that. Collecting people's information, communicating stuff is really, really key. And so I would encourage you to have good communication with members. Tell them what you're doing as a board. Encourage open dialogue. Respect one another, especially if you have a dissenting view within the community. I was writing a book an article a while back on the crazies within our industry, and then I changed my perspective. It's not really that; it's that people are really passionate for their castle. You're living in a community where people own their castle, and they're passionate about it. So we have to respect each other, and we have to be civil in as a characteristic that is paramount. We have to be civil with one another. When we look at board effectiveness, we have to strive for unanimity as a board. I'll tell you what, one of the things that we kept saying at Sun City, and I've promoted this ever since that time period back in the 90s when it really came to full thought for me, was that the most successful boards that I'd seen are those boards that, although they debated an issue and there may be a dissenting vote, they really strived to get a unanimous vote. Sometimes setting aside a topic that was not overly critical and coming back and negotiating it a little bit and coming back and striving for unanimity was one of the strongest characteristics of a successful board. You have to speak with, that should be one voice, not on voice, but should speak with one voice as a board, not board members that are running around doing their own thing. You ought to conduct business for your board meetings instead of conducting business and social meetings at the same time. Now with this environment that we're in, it makes it a little bit easier to actually hold a Zoom meeting and just do business. But we always talk about the length of time board meetings run. I've had people tell me they've had 2, 3, 4 hour board meetings. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. We should be able to conduct board for a business for this size of corporations that we manage in an hour, and probably an hour or a quarter. We just need to make decisions. So conduct business, not social. You want to get together and have meals, that's great. But social and business is hard when you try and combine them. And so I would try and separate them. Be prepared to make decisions. I had some friends that had been managers for years, and one guy said at one time that he actually would cellophane the board packet so that when people showed up at the board meeting, he could tell it actually read the board packet, or who was prepared to discuss it, or those that came just to review it at the board meeting. If you're serving on a board, you have a duty to come to board meetings to make a decision. You should have reviewed that information. It's incumbent upon management to ensure that we give you the right information so that you can make those decisions. Not volume of information, but concise, proper, effective, real information so that you can make decisions. Instead of giving you landscaping bids that are 20 pages, we ought to give you a summary page so that you can see what the results of the bidding was and maybe a recommendation. But you have to come and be prepared to make a decision. Oftentimes you need to seek professional advice. Recently, we have a community here that we've been managing for years. They had never gone out and sought legal counsel, and they were making, in my view, some questionable decisions. And so when I encouraged them to seek legal counsel, they in fact did, and they started making the right decisions. And it is important to seek professional advice. Hold yourself to a higher standard in your community. As a board member, you should be held to a higher standard. If you have an enforcement issue within the community, it shouldn't be on a board member. You ought to pay your assessment on time. You ought to communicate properly. And of course, you always have to be respectful in your communication and civil in your language. When it comes to operational staffing, some of the successful board characteristics are don't micromanage staff. Don't get in the operational side of things. Stay on the policy side of things. Engage staff as a partner with the board. I'll tell you, I've had board members that have seen me as the manager as the enemy. I'm not the enemy. I'm an agent. And there are two roles within community associations. The board role is a fiduciary role. Your job is to protect the assets of the corporation. The manager's job is an agent role. He has some fiduciary responsibility, but his total responsibility is as an agent. And as an agent, when you look it up, an agent sometimes has to give advice to the board that they don't want to hear. I'm sorry, board, no, you can't take reserve money and go out and have a party with it. It's, the AICPA guidelines say it has to be used for the purpose in which it was collected. And they don't want to hear that. You need to seek legal advice on amending your bylaws. So they don't want to hear that. You can't call a meeting because it doesn't comply with state statute. We have to be the agent, and the agent oftentimes is not, doesn't necessarily coincide with some of the desires of the board. So we want to be a partner with you, but when you see us as the enemy, as a board, it becomes very difficult for us to perform and to do our job. I'll let you read the rest of them here, but I'll go back to the protocols. Establish how you want to conduct communication with one another. What are the protocols? You're going to email everything? Is the board president going to be the communication voice for the board? I don't know. It all depends on what works for you. The last one on this list is an annual list of expectations. One of the most valuable tools that I found as a manager is when the board actually sat down and just gave me a half a dozen to a dozen expectations that are, you have your management contract, but there's expectations about things that are very nimble within the association. How much time you want us to respond to requests and the type of communication you want, but set your expectations. It's really, really critical. I had expectations set for me, and I had a process to do it. And if you want, I'll share my process with you. Feel free to send me an email. My email is on the presentation. But I had expectations set for me at Sun City, and on an annual evaluation, the board would use my list of expectations that they set in order to evaluate me. And so when they came to me and said, well, Rob, you're meeting all these expectations, but you're not meeting this expectation about being available for board members when they stop by your office. And I said, well, it's not an expectation you gave me. One of your expectations is you want me out in the field looking at all of our amenities and talking to people. And if I'm going to do that, that conflicts with me being in the office all the time waiting for you to stop by. And I said, look, you set expectations for me, so I'm meeting your expectations that you set. This one you never gave me. And they actually looked at it and said, you're exactly right. And they pulled it back and they said, that's not an expectation that you can fulfill and fulfill the rest of them. Setting expectations eliminates confusion a lot of times. And if you're having difficulty with your manager, my recommendation to you as a board, and managers for you, if you're having problems with the board, is to set expectations. I can tell you that as a president of a company, I have expectations of our boards. And I have a small list of about 6 expectations, 7, depending on the board, that I share with them. And it has to do with our expectations of them on how I expect them to communicate with us, how much time I expect them to give us to research issues, how to treat us, how to give us information, how to be civil with us, and so forth. So I'm advocating that those expectations be in writing and they be communicated on an annual basis. And then finally, community impact, some of the characteristics for community impact that I think are paramount to a successful board. One is being polite to people within the community. Man, I've had board members that were just, they got on the board and they just became, I don't know, they solidified their desire to be king, and they were not polite at all. They were rather mean to anybody and anybody that had any idea. They thought that it was their duty to be that way. And unfortunately, it doesn't help build community when you're that way. You need to seek resolution instead of conflict. If there's an issue in your community, solve it. Work to solve it. Don't work to light more fire or throw fuel on the fire. You know, you're there to preserve, maintain, and enhance the value of the assets of the corporation, because what they do is it affects the value of individual castles within your community, individual homes. If the entrance coming into the community looks like crap, we'll tell you what, it's gonna affect the value of the residents that live in that community. If there's a lot of lawsuits going on because people just can't get along and they got to sue each other, it affects the value of that community. So understand that your duty as a board is to build up value in the community, not tear it down. And finally, the last thing I'll say about this is strive for community harmony. There's nothing better than trying to create a harmonious community. It increases the capital, the political capital within the community. It increases the ability for people to communicate. And I will tell you, it's from my perspective, it holds people accountable. We recently, in this community that I'm on the board for, have had people that speed, as I'm sure some of you do within your community. And I've done some research on why people don't obey the rules. And most of it is because they don't feel connected within the community. The individuals who understand that, man, I don't want someone next door to me coming over and saying, you were speeding through here and you almost ran over my kid or my dog, or, you know, you're not paying attention. People that recognize that are conscious of that, are people that understand the building of community. And when you're striving for community harmony, those kinds of things will affect how people treat each other within the community itself. So successful communities have really 4 main pillars to them. Setting expectations are mainly done by having a vision that's set for the community and a mission on how they're going to accomplish it. Setting expectations also helps in the process of, come on, why isn't it, there we go. Connecting individuals' willingness to pay for their expectations. One of the lessons that I learned as a manager many, many years ago in this industry was you should never say no when someone asks for something within a community. It should always be, yes, we can do that for you. Now, there might be an additional cost to it, but when you look at the cycle of how the board duties and the homeowner responsibility affects staff functions, and how staff functions feed into the board accomplishing its duties, it is one cycle. There's an old saying in our industry that it all works because it all works. And when you start to split apart a community because people don't want the swimming pool because I don't use the swimming pool, or we don't want to do, you know, we don't want to maintain the community in a certain manner because it's too costly or whatever. those kinds of challenges within a community are something that the board has to be very cognizant of and protect the interaction of those three individual responsibilities so that the pillars, the vision, mission, expectations, and the willingness to pay for the fulfillment of those expectations comes together to create the community that the board really is trying to achieve or should be trying to achieve. Any one of these four pillars falls apart, it prevents the three functions, board duties, homeowner responsibility, and staff functions. It prevents those three from coming together to bolster that community and to create a community that will be successful. There's a last part of this, and I don't see any questions coming on, or I'd answer them, but feel free to type a question in there. I hope when you look at the concept of successful communities and the do's and don'ts, mirror, mirror on the wall, how do we create success within communities, that you understand that you have a duty as a board and managers have a duty as a professional to ensure that they work together to accomplish what's best for the community. I would encourage you to write things down. There's nothing better than having a vision that's written that should be part of your website. It should be part of your communication, whether you're doing a newsletter or an email or sending out statements. And that mission will help set the premise by which you set your annual operating budget. If you're going to accomplish a mission to fulfill your vision, then you're going to set your operating budget to be able to do so. I did a program here in St. Louis, I think it was a couple of years ago now, on budgeting. And one of the premises that I used in that particular program was understanding that you shouldn't start with how much revenue we have and how we're going to spend it. You should start with, what is the mission that we're trying to accomplish, and what is it going to cost to accomplish our mission? And maybe you have to change your mission or your vision in order to fulfill that duty of being able to finance it. There are many times when people come to me in our industry, and it could be in any one variances, whether it's an individual within the community or board, and they want certain things to happen. But when we present them with the cost associated with it, they have a change of heart, or they desire not to proceed because they don't want to have to pay for it. I see that when I do reserve studies. So many people don't want to fund a reserve fund because they have excuses as to, I won't be here when it comes to be replaced and all of that. But they don't understand that it affects the value of their individual residents. So willingness to pay is a big challenge within communities in order to fulfill the duties that the board has, to fulfill the responsibility that the homeowners have, and to provide enough information and enough ability for the staff to fulfill its functions. I hope, I know I'm a little short on time. It's only a quarter till, but I wanted to, I hope that's good information for you. And what I'm going to do is, if any of you have a question, feel free to send me an email. You have my email address. I'll be glad to take them on Zoom as well. And there's a little video at the end that Kathy wanted me to complete. And so I'm going to start with that.
Hey, Rob, we do have some questions. Diana, did you want to filter them, or did you want me to?
Can you see them, Kathy?
Yes.
I don't see them on the chat, so sorry.
No, you're fine. They're under the Q&A. So
Right.
the first one is, what if you find a decision of the board was based on wrong or incomplete information?
Okay, I popped it up. I see it now. What if you find a decision on the board was based on wrong or incomplete information? Look, first of all, out of 360,000 community associations, do you think we get it right all the time? No. And there's nothing that can't be undone. You can change a budget in the middle of the year if you want. You can do anything you want. There's nothing, we're not creating nuclear weapons here. All we're doing is we're trying to create successful communities. So if the information was wrong or incomplete, and actually those are different, because when I talk about boards making decisions, your job as a board member is to actually vote to make decisions. The worst thing that a board member can do is abstain, because there's two reasons to abstain within community associations. I'll turn my fingers like this. The first reason to abstain is if you have incomplete information. I didn't get enough information in the bids to render a decision, or I didn't get the number of bids. We only got one bid and we needed at least two. That's incomplete information. And so you should abstain if you have incomplete information. The second reason you should abstain from voting is if you have a true conflict of interest. Well, I own the landscaping company that presented a bid, so you should abstain, and you should actually not even engage in conversation regarding that particular vote, because you have a direct conflict of interest. The other issue about wrong decisions or wrong information, wrong information is go back and redo your decision. There's nothing that stops you from going back and doing reconsideration of a previous decision. Just document why you're doing it. We had wrong information. We were told by our CPA that we couldn't do this, and it was wrong. Or we were told by our professional manager that that the state statute said this, and actually they said something else. There is nothing wrong with going back and redoing a decision. It's just, again, we are not in a position that everything is so exact, and there's a lot of human input into what we do. And so it's important to be able to do that. Now, if there is an impact because of the decision the board has made, you might have to call a special meeting. So if you made a wrong decision and selected a contractor that you think was wrong, go back and redo it. Every contract should have an out for you to exempt yourself from. So feel free to do so. Gloria asked, when a board makes a decision, does it stay made forever? Or what happens when a new board chooses to ignore a process? Oops, that just went away. So I can answer that one real quick. Again, one of the things that I found to be the most to prevent that kind of thing from happening is for the community to continually possess and focus on its vision. So if the vision is it's going to be an active adult community, and assisted living stuff keeps coming back up and you want to reconsider it, keep going back to your vision. If you want to have if your vision for your community is to present a safe environment for people to live in, and you decide to remove the gates from the community or get rid of the video camera system or not hire the security anymore, you need to go back and either change your vision or revisit your vision. So decisions the board can make this year can be changed in future years. If this board decides that it's not going to fund the reserve fund this year so we can keep assessments low, and next year the next board comes in and says, we're going to double the assessment because we need to start funding reserves, that's a good decision. It could also be a good decision that the board decided to double the assessment this year and next year it drops back because it doesn't want to overfund the reserves. I mean, again, we're not creating decisions that they're policy decisions, and they can be changed from year to year. Gloria asked, is getting 3 bids a recognized business practice that is mandatory over certain project costs, and or when can one hire trusted vendors? Another great question. So part of the answer to that question is found in your governing documents. Sometimes in your governing documents, your CCNRs, your bylaws, it may say that the board must bid out projects that are over excess dollar amounts. Sometimes your governing documents are silent on it. If it's found within your governing documents, then you have to do it. But realize that you can't always get 3 bids. And my suggestion is that you don't bid everything out every year. People get tired of bidding. I'm a reserve specialist. I've had people ask me for bids year after year after year, but don't ever select me as a reserve professional. How many times do you think I'm going to keep bidding their projects? So if you're going back to the well every year to ask for bids, you may not get 3 bids every year. And so my suggestion is that you keep trusted vendors. If you are satisfied with the service you're getting, you don't need to change management companies. You don't need to change the landscape company. You need to make sure that you're being satisfied. Right, as one of your sponsors said, make sure you're writing the right specifications when you're bidding stuff out. What's a good rule of thumb? A good rule of thumb is to get 3 bids. You can go out and ask 5 people to bid. You may only get 2. You get 2, you got 2 to work with. That's what we have done many times here. So my suggestion is that would be what I would try and achieve, is to get a minimum of 3. But it's hard to compare if you don't have multiple bids. And so I suggest that you do at least that as a rule of thumb, and it's good business practice. But make sure that you're comparing apples to apples when you're getting those bids in.
Great, Rob. Thank you. Do we have any more questions? You guys can post them through the chat or the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Rob, you did a great job as always. Thank you so much for always being here for our chapter. We appreciate you. While we wait to see if there's any more questions that come in, I just want to remind everybody that this is our last live webinar that we're doing, educational webinar this year. But I wanted to remind you guys that we do have our annual meeting and our holiday party. We're doing it virtually on Thursday, December 3rd at 3 p.m. Please, log into Zoom. We have a lot of fun things planned. We're making it totally free for all our members. Find out who won the election, find out who won chapter awards. Will also find out who won $750 worth of cash prizes for our +1 membership campaign. And we also have a mixologist that's going to come and mix some drinks for us too. So we hope you guys can make it. I don't see any more questions on. Diana, do you see any more? I don't think.
No, I don't.
Okay. Then I guess we're going to close it out for today. Rob, again, thank you for everything. We appreciate you and hope to see you guys at our annual meeting holiday party on December the 3rd.
Happy holidays,
Great.
everybody.
Thanks.
Take care.
You too, Rod. Take care. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.